I've been your state senator for, well, it's really been a long couple of years, but I started in 2020, beginning of 2020, so a little over 2 years. And of course, really became, in January of 2020, I went to Albany for the first time, and by March we were locked down with the pandemic. It's been an unusual time. I think that probably the biggest thing for me was the fact that we saw a lot of our essential liberties suspended, and unfortunately that continues on. I think that in New York State we face a lot of challenges, but the economic recovery from the pandemic and being able to thrive is important. And I also think that we have a lot of good people here that want to see the right things done. It's just a matter of getting those people to speak up and sometimes, but also getting people to work together and to cooperate. We try to do that as much as possible. I'm certainly outspoken in Albany, but I also do try to do what I can to move things along. One of the things I'm very proud of is making the Nourish New York program permanent and recurring. It was a huge help to our farmers that benefited from that program. That was a bipartisan effort, and it was signed by the governor, and it will provide $25 million in funding to help ensure that people that are in the most need get New York grown products from our farmers here. And it was a lifeline for agriculture as well as food banks during the pandemic, and now it is going to be a sustaining program. And that was really myself, Assemblyman Giglio, and so many others that worked hard and reached across the aisle to do that. So it can be done. There are topics that do bring us together, and then there are the topics that we have to really speak up for areas like here, for our area, the areas that are often forgotten. And that's really, I think, our biggest challenge, is being that voice. We just finished the budget process, which is an interesting process here in New York State. I spent 10 years in county government. I'm a business owner, some of you might know, and budgets are typically about money and numbers and what are you going to project and what are you going to spend. But in New York State, we throw a lot of policy into the budget, and that's where it becomes controversial, because we just had a very controversial issue with trying to make changes to the bail reform laws. Those changes were put into a portion of the budget called Education and Labor. Not sure what that has to do with law enforcement or criminal justice. It was 64 different sections with several subsections, and you get one vote, up or down. So that's how this works in Albany. It's about taking controversial issues and burying them in something like a state budget, even in an area that has absolutely nothing to do, relevant to the topic, like bail reform. So we passed a $220 billion budget, a record budget, larger than Florida and Texas combined, and it was unfortunately used up all of the federal ARPA money, that one-time infusion of money from the federal government, largely for pandemic relief, and put that into creating a lot of recurring programs. So eventually, at some point, that's going to mean higher taxes for New York State. And I will give Governor Hochul credit. She did try to put forth a budget that did not spend all that money, all that one-time money, and did fund some reserves and use it for infrastructure, one-time infrastructure. But once it got to the Senate and the Assembly, that all got thrown out, and they increased the budget pretty substantially. So I don't want to take up too much time talking about it. I want to listen to what you have to say. That's the purpose of this tonight, is to give you the opportunity to ask questions. And I also just want to take a moment to introduce again Assemblyman Giglio and see if he'd like to say anything.
Thank you, Senator. It's great to be here. As I told him earlier, it's only 20 minutes from home. I'm doing really well. As the Senator said, he's been around for a short time, but he's made a great impact. He's become part of a bigger team that has done a lot of good as we battle a lot of the things he talked about today, or so far today. The biggest thing is this budget that just hit. People don't understand. We have what's called 10 budget bills. 7 of them, Article 7's language. The other ones are appropriations. They don't match up. They put the good with the bad in. And since the Senator's been here, he has stood there saying not to put policy in the budget because it's a fiscal document, and our side has fought to have that happen. And those of you that know me know I'm better in a conversation than I am in giving speeches. So whenever the questions are ready, thank you.
Short and sweet. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it.
We got questions.
Oh, you got questions already. All right, great. All right.
Oh, yeah. So the first one doesn't have a name on it, but it's a very recent topic. Speaking of government overreach, please update us on the lawsuit re Health Department regulations, specifically
Yeah,
needing
all right.
the isolation and quarantine.
All right, great. Yes. Yeah, good question. All right, I love good questions like that. I think a lot of you may have heard of something called Assembly Bill 416, A416. It was a topic of discussion, controversy. I actually went on Fox News on Laura Ingram's show to talk about that. And it was a bill that went nowhere for several years that essentially would give the governor and the Department of Health the authority to essentially take someone out of their home under the suspicion that they might have a communicable disease. That was a Assemblyman Perry bill. I think it goes back to 2015, if I'm not mistaken.
It's a very old bill.
Yeah, before the pandemic. And that bill went nowhere. It never had a single co-sponsor. It never got onto an agenda in the Health Committee. It never had matching legislation in the Senate. But somehow, the governor decided that she was going to take the meat of that A416 and put it into Department of Health regulations. It's a clear violation of the separation of powers. If you want it to be a law, then bring it forward, put it on an agenda, put it up for a vote, and let the members of the Senate and the Assembly vote on it. This should not be a Republican versus Democrat issue. This is a separation of powers issue. The governor is essentially trying to write law. That is against the Constitution of New York State. So thanks to a lot of people like yourselves, we heard about this Department of Health regulation out there. And was it about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago?
It was, yeah, a little less than 2 weeks.
About 2 weeks ago, myself and a couple of members of the Assembly sued the governor over this. And it is currently in court. In fact, I just had a conversation with the attorney before coming here. But it's in progress. And I believe that it's very clear violation of separation of powers. That this is not something that is within the purview of the governor. That's the crux of the lawsuit. But there's additional questions there. There's questions of due process, about the ability for someone, a local health official, to say, I believe you were exposed to a communicable disease, therefore I am going to take you away from your family or make you quarantine in your home without the proper due process. Now I will say the regulation uses the words due process, but it doesn't define what that is. Due process is not something that you just automatically get. It's something that requires a process. When you have, for example, Kendra's Law, you all folks all know Kendra Webdale from Fredonia is actually someone I knew in high school who was shoved in front of a subway train by a schizophrenic. We have Kendra's Law now, and Kendra's Law has very specific due process that has to be followed in order for someone to be evaluated and committed. This law does not. This regulation does not. So there's also a clear issue with what is it we're going to allow our government to do without having to prove that what they're doing is in the best interest of the people, and that you've given people their due process, their constitutional right to due process. And that's a concern, and that's what remains to be seen.
But that due process under the Emergency Act, can't they just do it anyway?
Well, no, actually, so
They mean in the government?
yeah, they under a state of emergency, they do have certain rules but they have to follow those rules. This goes well beyond the emergency authority. So, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. You want to add? Yeah, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, you have to understand the genesis of this bill. When it came from Nick Perry and it came into the Assembly, it was about Ebola, when nobody knew what Ebola was. When they found it out, it never went anywhere. And we're still looking at, in addition to the court case, legislative remedies to stop this. Too many governors have decided, and I'll go back to what George said earlier, putting things in the budget policy. Too many governors with emergency rights have tried to take away our civil rights. Yes. And that's what we're fighting against, to make sure you can't do that. Nick Perry, in fact, withdrew the bill earlier this year. And then the governor, the current governor, and her new commissioner of health decided to try to sneak this in. But we caught it. There is the legal remedies he's talking about, and the legislative remedies that we're working on.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right, we're going to dive into another very timely topic. Aaron said, what's being done to fight the people in Albany who want to outlaw burning of wood, natural gas, and propane, which that's what a lot of us out here heat with?
Yeah. Folks, you have to pay attention to this. This is really important. We have this thing, the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership Protection Act, which sounds like a great idea. We all want clean air, clean water. We want to, but the bottom line is that the things that they have prescribed to do could be very harmful. One of them is not being allowed to have any new natural gas hookups or propane hookups January 1st, 2024, less than 2 years from now. This would be disastrous, especially up here. I think that the irresponsible part of this is that I don't care how you're concerned about renewable energy, what you think, but the bottom line is natural gas should be used as a bridge fuel at the very least, and it is a lower emission fuel. And the fact that we're just going to cut this off and think that we're going to just heat everything with electric and all this is a fallacy. It's not going to happen. We do not have the capacity. Our grid does not have the capacity. We don't have the electricity generation. You'd have to, roughly, a study that I read is you'd have to basically more than double the current output of electricity in New York State just to even come close to meeting the electricity needs. But more importantly, it's a shell game. It's a joke. What's happening is we're running transmission lines to the dirtiest coal plants in places like Homer City, Pennsylvania. That's where electricity is now coming from. We used to be energy independent here in New York State. We used to produce our own electricity. We shut down the Dunkirk plant. Governor Cuomo promised it would be repowered with natural gas. That never happened. So what happened instead? We're now importing, in Western New York, we import about 25% of our power from places like Homer City, Pennsylvania. So if it's truly global climate change, then what does it matter if you're generating the power in New York or 100 miles down the road of Pennsylvania? It's still greenhouse gas emissions, it's still carbon emissions. This is so that we can pretend, and I use the word pretend very intently, pretend we're doing something about climate change here in New York. Because in the end, we're actually making things worse, not better. We could actually do it better here in New York. We would do it with lower emissions, using natural gas, which is abundant here, and we could actually have a positive impact if you believe that this is an issue. But we're not. We're pretending we're doing something about it, and that's going to be the issue.
They have the technology to burn coal clean too, but they just won't.
Well, yeah, they don't want to hear anything about clean coal. That's even worse than, but you're right. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. But, there isn't an engineer that would sign on to this plan. This is all activists, this is all environmentalists, and it's the people that are making big money off of this push to green energy. All these people that want to blanket upstate New York with wind turbines and solar panels that are making big money off of government subsidies. Because none of these things are profitable without government subsidy. They want to put wind turbines in Lake Erie, which is a disastrous idea. We'd be the guinea pigs. Nowhere in the world is there a fresh water supply that has been potentially endangered by drilling into the bottom of that lake, which we all know because a lot of us, like myself, remember when Lake Erie was considered a dead lake because it was so toxic. All that stuff's still there, it's just covered up. Yep. And we're going to dig down and pour God knows how many tons of concrete into our lake that 11 million people draw their drinking water from. It's just a bad idea. But again, there are better ways to do this. I mean, New York State is the third largest producer of hydroelectric power. We could do a lot more hydroelectric power. It's clean, it's green, but New York State does not consider hydroelectric power to be renewable.
But if our government pushing it, how do we stop it?
Yeah. Well, the bottom line is that I think that the governor, I think people are starting to understand what's going on. You got to wake up. We got to wake up, Western New Yorkers. I was on the Tom Borrello show. There's people now in Buffalo that are aware of this. Again, I don't think this is a Republican versus Democrat issue. I think this is a quality of life issue, and I've called on my colleagues on the other side of the aisle in Western New York. Where do you stand on this? Where do you believe this is a good idea? And they don't answer. That's the thing. But they're going to have to answer. And if they don't, the people that live in their districts need to hold them accountable for that. Quite honestly, that's the only way.
But once it's passed, we don't have legacy.
Yeah. Well, it's not passed yet. People are starting to wake up to this. I will say that the governor did include in the budget this whole thing of converting natural gas, taking away the natural gas and propane. That was taken out of the final budget. It's not in there. So I believe we are gaining ground there. We've been very vocal on this. We've done press conferences. We've pushed on this, and I think that that advocacy did get that out of the budget. So for the short term, it's a short-term win, but we still have a long-term gain.
Well, what about the wood burning?
Yeah, same thing. There was nothing in the budget about that. So.
New York contributes 0.5% to climate change. 0.5%. And this is their approach to it. It is outlandish to think that this could even possibly work. There's no transition period. There's nowhere to go. We did vote against it in the Assembly and the Senate, at least our side did. And we realized that there has to be, as the Senator put it, a bridge. But we got to get to that bridge. It's not etched in stone yet. The studies are not done. We have people working day and night to try to get this put off or changed. New York got the biggest exodus of population in the country. And the minute if this ever passes, that will be double. And that's just the way it is. And the one thing I tell everybody, and especially a crowd like this, people pay attention to the federal government all the time, and you'll hear about their green plan and that. They need to pay attention to us in the state of New York. We affect your life daily more than the feds do. And so it's our job to make sure that these things don't happen. But we need your support and people out here knowing what's going on. Because the way they do things and the way we pass the budget is in the middle of the night. So nobody can see what we're doing. And this year, we didn't even get to see the budget bills. It's supposed to be 3 days. We got to see them an hour before we were asked to vote on them. And we went almost 48 hours straight for the last 2 days of session to make sure we can get these budget bills passed. And then we found out during that some of these things were removed because the governor knows that's bad. That's bad politics, and right now everything's political with them.
Also, add one other thing. I posted, I sent emails, I posted, there was a comment period. I don't know if anybody went on there, gave your comments. That's important. You need to speak up. If you haven't done that, please do. I think it's on our Facebook page,
And our website.
on our website. Go there, give your comments. Explain why this is a problem. The more of that, because I'll tell you what happens often is people, our friends on the other side of the aisle say, well, we haven't heard from anybody about this. They say that a lot. When we review a bill, we haven't received any letters of opposition to this.
That's why we slam.
And that's, you got to be out there. We're doing it, but we can't be the only ones. Everyone else has to do it. If you belong to any organization, statewide organization, I would strongly encourage you to make sure that they get involved. I don't care if it's a snowmobile association or a realtor. Everybody belongs to some kind of a statewide organization. Make sure they're speaking out about this too. These are important topics, and if you don't say anything, that's their excuse to just keep pushing this forward. So we'll continue to push.
They can also use their cell phones. They can text people and tell people what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's if you go to our Senate website and also our Facebook page, there's contact information. So please do. Please do. There's strength in numbers.
How do we remove legislators and senators and governors who ignore the will of their constituents? And I'm sure most people saw about an hour before we walked into today, the lieutenant governor resigned.
Yeah.
Appropriately, based on some charges today. But how else do we get people out of office?
Yeah. In New York State, that's a difficult process. I remember when I was a county legislator, we looked at this, but there are the articles of impeachment, but the problem is that in itself is a political process. Andrew Cuomo, when he started that process in the Assembly, the way it works is you've got the Senate and the Assembly. The Assembly essentially is, for lack of a better term, they're the lawyers. They're the ones who develop the case. They interview witnesses, and then they present articles of impeachment to the Senate, and the Senate conducts a trial. Well, the Assembly never finished the job. Well, once the governor said he was going to resign, they stopped. The Judiciary Committee stopped. And that turned out to be, in my opinion, a mistake, because one of the things that could have been done if he was fully impeached was there could have been written into the impeachment barring him from ever running for office again. Now, this has happened historically. They actually had a governor about 100 years ago that was impeached. And they never actually, in the impeachment, put that in there that he wouldn't be able to run again. And sure as hell, he ran for Assembly and won. So, I think that was a mistake. I think that the governor cut a deal, and they stopped their investigation. So there is a process there, but the process in itself is also very political.
New York doesn't have recall with one of the many things we've proposed in the past that it should have. As the Senator explained, the Judiciary Committee in the Assembly was charged with doing the investigation, and they did it, and it was near completion when the governor one first thing in the morning said he was going to fight it out, and then by 11 o'clock he resigned, strictly because of what the senator said. He knew he was going to try to run again, and if we would have got to full impeachment and the Senate would have tried and found him guilty, then they could have made the caveat that he could never run for public office in New York again. But that's the problem. We don't, once they're there for a long time. Governors especially should have term limits.
Yeah.
The governor's been there for 12 years, the former governor, and he wanted 16. And it was only because his ego wanted to beat his father. I don't know what that says about him, but that's another story. The fact of the matter is that we need to have those kind of things, because when the people are fed up and see something's going wrong, I think recall is a way they can get their voice heard. Now, recall only means that they'll be voted on again, so they have a chance to stay. But the fact of the matter is let's have that option, and let's have term limits for the Attorney General, for the Comptroller, for the Governor, all those administrative spots. Once they're there too long, that's what you see the problem, because it doesn't get to be about the people in the state of New York. It gets to be about them.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, thanks. Another question?
Keep them coming. All right, a little more local this time. Barbara said, over the past 30 years, we have lost the Psychiatric Center, Jan Adam, and Tri-County Hospital. We are concerned as to the state's plan for Gowanda Correctional Facility. Will this facility end up like Jan Adam and end up in decay?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question. I can tell you that we've asked that question and we don't get answers. We have a problem there. There's no doubt that we have the Main Street School in Silver Creek. Anybody that's driven by there knows what a problem that is, and there should be a plan for these things. And it's not that we don't have the money. I mean, we've spent a lot of money on a lot of things. We could have a fund in New York State to take these buildings down. But the bigger issue is that why do we do this in the first place? Gowanda and Collins are tied. They rely on each other. As far as the physical plants, they need each other, and this was a political choice. This wasn't a business choice to shut that down. The other issue I have is I believe that the reason that we have such a historically low number of inmates is because we're letting criminals out onto the street. So eventually that tide's going to turn the other way, and then what are we going to do? So my hope is that they keep this facility, which, by the way, on top of being a correctional facility, also had some specialized programs that they just cut off like that, for people with DWIs, people with substance use disorders, things like that just went away because of a political decision that was made. I have called out the acting Commissioner Annucci several times on this. I did it again in the budget process. He was up for nomination to be the commissioner, and his nomination never went forward. I think it had a lot to do with what happened during the hearing process. So I think we do not want another decaying building. We've got plenty of those. And the bottom line is that there should be a process. But in general, with this, specifically with this facility, we should at least keep this ready to go, because they spent a lot of money on that building right before it closed. They just put a new roof on it. They had to complete that project. So what a waste of money, a huge waste of taxpayer money. There's plenty of other places that they could have looked at before this place. But Joe, anything you want to comment on that?
I worked very hard on trying to make sure that all the correctional facilities stayed open, especially the one in my own home. But the fact of the matter is in 2005, the legislature passed a bill that said whenever you close the facility, you had to do it over a 1-year period to give the community time to react, to give the poor folks that worked and lived in that community time to react, and again, for economic development purposes. There's also money put in to pay and help those communities that lost those facilities recover. We attempted to sue them. I went to Nyskova's lawyers and said, how can we pass a bill in a budget that violates a 2005 law? Well, I guess what they told me, as it turned out after the investigation, was, well, the budget can overdo that law. I don't know how. I still think we would win, but that's another story. And now it's even worse because she closed 6 more facilities. And one of those things that she said during that is maybe we could turn them into drug treatment facilities. Well, a lot of those guys were there because of drugs, but not to be treated. The other thing was, one of the places they closed was a drug treatment facility. There's no, as the senator said, there's no logic to this. This was a political hit. There were so many numbers of folks in Gowanda, so many inmates, so many employees, they just decided that number fit and they closed it. They've done it in the North Country, they've done it in Central New York, they've done it everywhere. And all we're doing is making our world a much more dangerous place, and we will not stop fighting them on this stuff. And we still think that there's an opportunity to win. And this year in the budget, there were no closings because she did it just before, back in December. Is that when she closed them? Like when they closed Gowanda, they waited to Christmas to give us a Christmas present.
Yeah, that's horrible. Thanks. Any other questions?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, lots of questions.
Kirk's got a list of reasons to leave New York State, but I'm just going to name a couple so you can address them. He talks about the legalization of pot
Yeah.
and how it stinks, and most people, people are driving, and how do we address that? And then also illegal immigrants. He says, why the hell are they being allowed in or able to vote? Especially in New York State, where we give them even more. So if you could address those two things
Sure.
to start.
Well, I just posted a video today of I did a debate on the legalization of recreational marijuana and how poorly it's been done in New York State, extremely poorly. Last March, a year ago, we passed a law to legalize pot. And on day one, they decriminalized the possession of marijuana. And that's really what's caused the biggest issue. Essentially, they've said there's no consequence to anyone for possessing, consuming marijuana. And they also made it much more difficult, far more difficult, for law enforcement to actually successfully evaluate and arrest someone for driving under the influence of marijuana. This is all in the name of social justice, but it threw public safety out the window. And that's why you're seeing what you're seeing right now. Now, we've all seen these quote-unquote dispensaries open up all over the place, all right? And and let me tell you this: the native territories are sovereign nations. They have the right to do this, but they could have done this 40 years ago, right? They've been selling gasoline and cigarettes tax-free for 40 years. Why did they start now? Because there's no longer any consequence for someone who's buying it. That's the problem. That's the mistake that they made. They basically said, and that's why you're seeing these dispensaries pop up overnight like mushrooms. And they have these things called sticker stores, where you walk into a store and they sell you a sticker or a t-shirt and they gift you a bag of pot. And the governor said, those are illegal. And I asked the question in the debate, have we shut any of them down yet? Silence. Because this isn't really about revenue, folks. They said this is going to be this amazing panacea of economic activity for New York State. We were going to generate $350 million in tax revenue the first year from the sale of recreational marijuana. Guess what they put in the budget, this budget, as their projected first year revenue? $56 million. We went from $350 million to $56 million because they know they screwed this up. Who the hell is going to buy legal marijuana? Think about it. It's not going to be anybody that lives around here. I mean, you can go get it anywhere at these sticker shops or at on native land. It's not going to be the people that they gave the ability to grow their own. You can have up to 5 pounds per adult in a household of marijuana. I don't think those people are going to go out and pay for marijuana. In fact, none of their friends and family are either. So who's going to pay this? This is the argument that I made. You know who's going to pay this tax? The poorest people living in inner cities in upstate New York and the 5 boroughs of New York City, the people that don't have the means to get somewhere, to get the tax-free discount marijuana, the people that pay more for a quart of milk than you and I pay for a gallon, those people, the poorest people among us, they're the ones that are going to pay the tax. And that's why the revenue is so low. That's why it went from $350 million to $56 million. Because the truth is, this is what they wanted. They wanted this to be a free-for-all. And they got what they wanted. They got what they wanted. But they lied to us and said this was going to be this amazing economic boon for New York State. It's not going to be. And if they continue down this road where there's no consequence, You're going to have people, right now you cannot use the smell of marijuana as probable cause for a police officer to take someone out of a car and do a roadside sobriety test. Yet, if you're drunk and they smell alcohol in your breath, they can pull you out of the car. That's the double standard. We're going to go back 30, 40, 50 years to what it used to be like with drunk driving. That's what we're going to do with marijuana in the name of social justice. And that's really tragic, because the difference between how we treat alcohol and how we treat marijuana, that delta is going to be measured in injuries and deaths. And that's the truth. And even if, I don't care if you're a strong proponent of legalization of recreational marijuana, you should be absolutely outraged as to how it has been rolled out in New York State. And that's the truth.
And also illegal immigrants, George.
Oh. I forgot the rest of it. Sorry. I forgot it was the second question.
Illegal immigrants having the right to vote.
Yeah. In New York City, undocumented people now have the right to vote. I think that's wrong. I mean, there should be certain privileges reserved for citizens of the United States and citizens of New York State, period. That's just the way it is. As Ronald Reagan said, a nation without borders is not a nation. And that also goes for New York State. We spend a lot of money for things that we should not have to, taxpayer money. And at some point, we're driving people out of New York State. We lead the nation in out-migration. And at some point you have to make a correlation between bad policy and the flight of people from New York State. And this is just another example of that. So.
But they're being replaced with the illegal.
The productive people are leaving, absolutely. So any other?
Yeah, I got more.
Anything you want to comment on that?
The only thing,
Sorry. Make sure I got a cordless mic.
the only thing that he failed to mention is, in New York, you can't get a liquor license if you've been convicted of anything.
That's right.
The only way you can get the marijuana license is if you've been convicted. I joke because look, I think some of you know that my wife and I are in the restaurant business. We own Sunset Bay, Cabana Sam. So I have 4 liquor licenses in my name. If you have a felony conviction, you are never getting a liquor license. But if you have a felony conviction, you go to the front of the line to get a marijuana license. That's and we're going to give you $200 million in free money to open a dispensary. So yeah, it is just absolutely outrageous. But we're going to make money at this, folks. Don't worry. So.
All right. Ken said, I would like to know when the pushing of the COVID-19 vaccine will stop. It goes against U.S. code he names to intimidate, coerce the civilian population, and the Nuremberg Code. Schools need to stop mandates, and officials need to be held responsible for crimes. So.
I think you all know that I've been against these mandates from the beginning. I think that this is a personal choice for folks. I think that, if you believe that this is going to keep you safe, then you have that right to do that. But the mandates have been a problem. It's also been a problem for our workforce. It's been a problem for our children's education. We've really taken a huge step backwards in that. All the people that were on the front lines during this pandemic who worked before there was a vaccine, before we even knew how deadly this was going to be or not be, they were there. And what did they get as their reward? They got fired. That's a problem. As far as who should take responsibility for that, this is another one of those situations where until someone challenges it, I've sued the governor over this topic. So until someone challenges it, it's going to remain the way it is. But it does take everyone speaking up and speak to folks in other parts of the state and let them know how you feel and what your concerns are, because there will be, I think, a groundswell for people for change. That's the bottom line. We just can't keep going down this road, and it's very concerning. Joe, you don't have to. I'm not.
The most dangerous thing in New York and probably America is when your government tells you we're going to do something for your own good. That's one of the biggest lies you're ever going to hear. As the senator said, they took away our choices. They're going to say we're going to do this for your own good. They've done it with guns. They've done it with medicine. They've done it with almost all our liberties. And that's what the problem is. And as long as we're controlled by supermajorities, it takes senators and assemblymen like us to get up and keep screaming and never stop. You can't do that. They shut down Western New York, former governor, when we didn't even have a problem, long before a problem. And that just, again, showed you, they said, this is for your own good. We're going to do that. That's the first big lie.
Gary says, why are we taxing law-abiding citizens in the state that already pay way more than they should? And he is mentioning the ammo tax.
Yeah. Yeah, and so far that hasn't gone anywhere, but that's just a ridiculous. If you haven't heard about this, 5 cents a round tax on ammunition, there is just, I guess the effort here on their part is they know that they can't directly go after our Second Amendment rights, but they can make it unaffordable or impossible to own a gun, and that's the route. But you know what? You look at New York City, and it is not legal. Essentially, it's nearly impossible to legally carry a firearm in New York City. And look where that's gotten them. Look at where they are right now. Look at what just happened today in New York City. You know, and here's the fundamental problem. I hear the governor and my downstate colleagues on the other side of the aisle say that they're very concerned about gun violence. The problem is they're not concerned about the people that are actually using the guns, because they continue to let people out over and over again. People that are caught with weapons they do not have legal possession of are let out with appearance tickets. So how is that addressing gun violence? If you're not addressing the people that are actually committing crimes, or at least in the possession of a weapon that they should not have, whether it was stolen or whatever it might be. And it's a revolving door. In fact, and I know they try to put something in the budget to address this, but you have to be, I think is what you have to be caught with 20 guns that you illegally possess in order to actually get a felony charge. 20 of them? Yeah, so there's a real issue there. The issue is they can talk about addressing gun violence, but the real issue is they want to address the legal possession of guns and not really do much about the people that use guns illegally or possess them illegally. So that's the fundamental difference. Did I catch all that, the question? Yeah, exactly. That's the fundamental thought process flaw there. Absolutely.
All right. Larry wants to talk about spending a little bit.
Spending.
The reimbursement rate for school capital projects is irresponsibly generous. This has created a perverse incentive for schools to build unwisely and extravagantly. He's suggesting the reimbursement rate should be cut by about 8%. High enough for necessary work would get done, but it would be low enough that frivolity and boondoggle would be avoided. And he also mentions a friend of his that built an athletic entertainment business, bowling alley with private money. Why can't Borrello build his athletic entertainment business with his own private money? Why should totally uninterested people be forced to subsidize a billionaire? So a little bit of capital spending.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is New York State is the most expensive place in America to do any of this. And you know, you can make a choice, right? You can say, in the sense of the pagulas, you can say, we're just going to let them go. There would be a dozen cities in the United States that would build them a stadium for nothing. So the whole problem is that do you believe that the Buffalo Bills have an economic impact on our area? I believe that they do. And if you do, then you have to understand that that $1.4 billion price tag is probably about $600 million more than it would be anywhere else because of bad state government policy. It's more expensive here than anywhere else. So essentially the money that the state is providing is just covering the additional cost of building it here versus somewhere else. So that's number one. As far as the school projects go, I think it's the same problem. You know, you have a lot of state regulations that make it more expensive. And if you want something built in New York State, it's going to cost you more here than virtually anywhere else in America. And that is why the state steps in. We just had a situation with this horrible overtime rule for farmers, where they want to lower the threshold again. And what is the state doing? Well, we're going to subsidize the overtime because it's more expensive to farm here in New York State than anywhere else in the nation. Now, this is eventually a game we're going to lose, right? Because you can't keep doing this for every situation and every project and every industry. You're going to lose this game eventually because you're going to run out of other people's money. And that's really where we are right now. But you know, in general, I'm supportive of economic development efforts that level the playing field with the people that we're competing with, especially here in this area, because we compete with Pennsylvania. And if we use every economic development tool in our toolbox in New York State, all we do is level the playing field when the people in Pennsylvania do nothing. And that's the challenge we face. It's a unique challenge we face here in Western New York, especially in the southern tier. You want to pass on that one? Okay. All right.
You can open it up if anybody has additional questions.
Sure. Anybody?
Very cooperative group.
Yeah, any questions? Yes, sir.
80% of the county budget is mandated by the state,
Yeah.
so that's not much leeway at the county level.
Yeah, I mean, I spent 10 years in county government. Chautauqua County, I was a legislator and also county executive. 85% of Chautauqua County's budget is state mandates. So Erie County, 100% of the property taxes that they collect go just to cover their local share of Medicaid. 100% of every property tax dollar in Erie County. So everything else that Erie County does is funded by sales tax and everything else. And again, it's close to that here in Cattaraugus County as well. I have, and I think Joe, whenever I see a bill that puts a new unfunded mandate on local government, I'm a no. Because I spent time in local government. Unfortunately, most of my colleagues haven't spent time doing anything other than being a community activist, whatever that is, or a staffer who now became a senator or assembly member. And this means you don't really have you're not in touch with reality. You haven't been in local government, you haven't been in small business, you haven't had skin in the game. You have theory about how these things work, but no actual reality as to how it works. And that's really a challenge because we have a lot of people that propose bills and push ideas that all, in the end, fundamentally burden local government. So it's a problem. Anything?
When Andrew Cuomo first got elected, we had 3 different task forces that formed. One of them was Medicaid, the other one was mandates, and the other one was to get rid of old laws. We brought forward a whole bunch of things that we could reduce the county mandates with, and that study never went anywhere. The Medicaid redesign team did a little bit more than that, and whatever happens after that. What happens is, there's one thing we do in state government real well. I shouldn't say we, but the governor does real well in state government, and so does the majority leader and the speaker. They delay things. So we do the study, we never get an answer. And then what happens next is, they divert it. There's a bigger problem. The budget was terrible this year, right? Today, we lost a lieutenant governor that resigned in disgrace. So their game is, just keep pushing it off, kick the can down the road, and at some point it'll be somebody else's problem, not ours.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
I'm going to use the illegal immigrants as an example. If it's illegal to give them a license, if it's illegal for them to vote, how come they're still able to do it, and who authorizes it, and why are we always on the defensive mode?
Well, in New York State, it is now legal for undocumented people to get a driver's license. That was a law that was passed, I don't know, before my time.
Yeah, before you, but
Yeah.
it had also been defeated many times before.
You know, and I think you have to have balance in government, and we lack balance right now. Everything's skewed one way, and again, not even so much Republican versus Democrat, but it's kind of this New York City far left thought process. And I mean, we have people. I've had debates with people up here that have said there's no socialists in New York State government. Yes, there are. There are people that are socialists, declared very happy to be socialists, to the point where, no, you're lying. There's no socialists. No, there are socialists that are they're backed by a national party called the Democratic Socialists of America, and that have backed them up, and they are proud socialists. And again, that's not Republican, Democrat. That's a whole other realm. And that's really the problem. Look, I come from a family of Democrats, but the Democratic Party was the party of the working class. It is no longer representing the working class, and because, and again, this is a public town hall. I don't want to be political, but you know, I think when you let a small group set the agenda for the rest of you, that is ultimately going to be a problem. So, any other questions? Yes.
Just a follow-up on your lawsuit with the health department. The CDC had a program to investigate, monitor 400 wastewater facilities in the United States. They've jumped that up to 600. And they don't say anything about quarantining people, but they're after some COVID or some toxins. And at the same time, Fauci is saying we're going to have a major outbreak by June. Is there what is the correlation between the ramping up of these wastewater investigations by the CDC and the effort by the governor to investigate wastewater? I mean,
Yeah, you know, and I can't tell you. I don't have any kind of knowledge on that at this point. I'd certainly love to learn more about the wastewater issue. So I just don't know the answer to that question, and I'm not aware of that, but that's perhaps something we can look into, and any information you have that you can share with us would certainly be appreciated.
Second part of this.
Yeah.
Have you got other support, other sponsors of your legislation? We only saw 4 at the press conference.
The lawsuit?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are a total of, I think it's 4 of us, myself, 3 of us, yeah, 3, yeah. And there's also the citizens group as well. So there's 4 complainants, but even if there's just one, the reason that I am a qualified complainant, there's a legal term, is because the substance of the lawsuit is that the governor violated the separation of powers. She's trying to make laws. I'm a lawmaker, so I have standing, that's the word I was looking for, standing in the lawsuit because she's violating essentially my right as a state legislator by trying to commandeer the ability to make laws. So that's the substance of the lawsuit, and that's why we have a standing in that lawsuit. And I think it's very clear, if you read the Constitution, it's very clear that this is an overreach.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, how is it we even have the SAFA process in the first place? Because all that is an end around to try and put things through that's against the will of the people, that they can't get through legislation.
Yeah.
So how did this thing get set up, and how do we get rid of it?
Well, it gets set up because during the pandemic we got very comfortable with having a dictator versus a governor. I mean, there's no other way to say it, because the legislature very happily ceded its authority to the governor. Now, it was under the fear of we needed to be able to have a quick response to an unknown threat in this pandemic and this virus, and we didn't have time for it to be slowed down through the legislative process. Okay, governors have that authority. That's why you have an executive, so that they can respond to emergencies. But the fundamental argument that I've been making is that's great when you're talking about a hurricane or a flood,
Exactly.
but not 2 years.
Right.
And we're way past that point, and that's where you have to restore the checks and balances of having co-equal branches of government, and that's the fundamental. That's the fundamental of the lawsuit.
Why?
Yeah.
How long is it going to take for something like that to take effect? Is it actually?
Well, there's. I can tell you that just today I had to sign off because the governor's lawyers decided they want to change venues. So that's a stall tactic. So they're going to drag this out as long as they can. Yeah. Yes.
Where are we at with taking this emergency act down, Doug?
Well, there isn't right now. There's no emergency. That's the thing. That's the whole problem. She's not operating under an emergency.
I'm talking about like in DC completely taking that power back away from them.
Well, again, I can't speak for the federal government. I'm at the state level. I'm just saying that we have she extended the executive order another 15 days, but we're not operating under the emergency authority that was originally granted to Cuomo. So,
How does the CDC control everything?
yeah, I can't. Yeah, the CDC. I know. Again,
For
yeah.
these vaccines and stuff.
Yeah, the CDC. Again, that's a federal agency.
First student to force these kids to get shots. How
Yeah.
come what's stopping that?
Yeah, again, I
The
can't.
people that are dying, and it's remdesivir that they're forcing the hospitals to give people?
Yeah. Well, I think that
That's how they die
Yeah,
from that,
yeah.
because it shuts down the kidneys, fills up the lungs, and they die. They put them on ventilator, die. 5 days.
Yep.
Yeah, again, we have to speak up against when you have a government that's operating without transparency and without accountability. That's a problem, and that was the basis of everything that myself and others have stood up against, is the whole idea of transparency.
Tons of information on the web.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you had your hand raised?
You need to do research.
You are not pushing it to have, that we cannot burn coal or wood.
I'm not. No, I'm not. No. That's. So this is something called the. So we've got the CLCPA, which is a piece of legislation that was passed that was going to convert New York to clean, green energy, and out of that came the Climate Action Council, CAC. The Climate Action Council is made up of a group of people that were appointed by the governor and the legislature, and to essentially set policies that will eventually be adopted. One of the policies that they recommended was this whole banning of burning wood and using natural gas and propane, heating oil, all that to be banned, and then no longer be able to construct a new building, a new home with using a natural gas hookup or a propane hookup, and then eventually, I think it's 2035, where you ban altogether the use of natural gas and propane and heating oil. But yeah, it's so that's, you know, again, it's a problem. But
That's how they live.
Absolutely.
It's just there. I love it.
And it is without a doubt a problem. Natural gas is abundant here, as I said before. It's clean. It's low cost. It is certainly better than ramping up dirty coal plants in other states to provide electricity. So that's the shell game. That's the fallacy. That's the lie, is that we're somehow doing something to improve climate change. We're not. We're doing zero. In fact, we're making it worse.
Is it already in effect in your?
No, it's not in. No, like I said,
The new builds too?
no, that's not in effect. And it was a recommendation from the Climate Action Council. It was adopted in the governor's budget, and it was taken out in the final adopted budget.
And New York City's out.
As of right now, what's that?
It's the end of the month to comment, correct?
Yeah, if you go back to our website and to our New York Senate page, there is you can click a link so that you can actually give a comment on this, and I strongly
By the
recommend you
end of the
do.
month.
Yeah.
That's when they're collecting the comments.
Yeah.
This month.
Read my example, her gas and I'm.
Yeah.
Did they ever give any thought to the fact that our Irish friends here don't use electricity?
Oh, hold on one second. I'm sorry. Yeah. Wait. Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We're talking about this global warming, and I've been a dairy farmer for years, and in the wintertime, the cattle keep the barn warm. We went from 1 billion people to 7.5 billion people, just from the body heat. That makes a lot of global warming. Plus, a lot of these roads are all blacktop now, used to be dirt roads, and so on, and with the sun beating down, that makes global warming.
Yeah. You know, look, there's I think the fundamental issue here is, are we going to actually have an impact here in New York State? And the answer is no. As the Assemblyman said, 0.5% of the global emissions come out of New York State. So if we got to zero, is that really going to have an impact? Now, some people say we should lead by example, but if you're going to lead by example, then you need to reduce consumption, primarily in New York City. By the way, up here in New York State, 88% of our power is already renewable energy, largely because of hydroelectric power. So we're not the problem here. It's New York City at 30%. 70% of the power that's consumed in New York City is generated by fossil fuel. And that's only if you count the stuff that's actually made here in New York State, let alone the power that we're importing. So, you know, and even the governor says it, we want to at the point of generation versus the point of consumption, all these things to signal the fact that they know it's a shell game. They know we're not really doing anything. But it's truly a problem. You know, it's the best path is to use natural gas and continue to. I think we have opportunity to increase our hydroelectric power here in New York State. We have countless small reservoirs and dams that have what's called deferred maintenance, which means that they are in dangerous need of repair, that could be repurposed to be small hydroelectric plants, and they could power communities. We could create microgrids, things like you've got so many other places locally that we could actually do better things with, but that's not, turning an old reservoir into a hydroelectric plant isn't something the governor wants to come and cut a ribbon on. They want to point to these big monstrosities like these giant wind turbines and say, look, I'm saving the planet. And it's just very political, unfortunately.
The lady over there.
Yeah. Yes. Hi. Hi.
I was wondering what your take was on dividing our state.
Yeah. So yeah. So I actually have a bill for that that I sponsored last year. Would create 3 autonomous zones in New York State. The bill basically just says let's do a study to see what that would be. And the knee-jerk reaction is, well, that'll never work. We can't survive up here without the money from New York City. And
That's 'cause we're so blind.
well, and the thing is, my issue is, if that's the case, then let's study that and see if that's actually the truth. Because I don't think we would. I think that, the reason that it's so expensive is because of all the mandates. And we would, if we had our own government, and again, it wouldn't technically divide the state. It would just create three. It would still be one state, but three different independent governments, essentially, for one state. Now you'd have the 5 boroughs of New York City, you'd have Long Island, and you'd have the rest of upstate New York as the 3 different zones. I think up here we could operate government far more efficiently and far less cost. And I think that would draw people and businesses out of the 5 boroughs to locate up here, just like it happens to us with Pennsylvania and Ohio. I think there's an opportunity there, but it's immediately rejected out of hand as, well, you folks will never survive without us. But why don't we study that and see if that's true or not? So that's the bill that we have, and I'm hoping that it'll get light of day. Yeah.
Yeah, just do it.
Yeah.
And ask forgiveness later.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what they do to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not possible that way.
Yeah.
Although I did watch a movie about the Free State of Jones one time during the Civil War, when part of the South decided to secede from the southern states and do it the same way. And I always thought they might work here, that we should just leave and see what they do next. I'm sure we'd see troops.
Yeah, bring them on, we're ready. We're all ready.
I don't think they'd want to come, don't get me
No,
wrong.
they would
There
not.
are guys. They
They
wouldn't want to come. I mean, you have to look at the whole situation. I have looked at the 2-state idea, a 3-state idea, and a 4-state idea. The last time a state split in the United States was West Virginia from Virginia in the Civil War. It has not happened since.
Right.
California, which we get compared to quite a bit, wanted to split into 3 states. They had a referendum, and they have referendum in California. We do not have it here. And that was pulled off on a technicality. So we were waiting to see what would happen there. Other states in the Union, including Pennsylvania, Illinois and Chicago, Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, Kansas or Missouri and Kansas City, they all want to do the same thing because there's not a balance. We're not represented the way we should be anymore.
Yep.
And the only thing that would change if you were to split New York into 2 states, and I'd leave Long Island with them, would be that we would only get 2 new senators. And then you would get a new state government, which would have a governor, attorney general, and comptroller. So the government doesn't change because Congress would stay the same because you would have the same amount of people, and that's what Congress is balanced on. The problem becomes the last time that we added 2 states to the Union, they added Alaska and Hawaii. And they added those 2 states because they were worried what was going to happen to the Senate. So they decided that, okay, we will add 2 states, Alaska will be Democrat, and Hawaii will be Republican. And I say that to you because you know today, Hawaii is Democrat and Alaska is Republican. So these guys don't know anything.
Exactly.
They're just guessing. They're just guessing. The people will eventually choose. And what the senator said is the most important thing throughout this whole conversation. We do not need New York City.
No.
We do not need their culture, their plans, their money, or anything else. They need us.
That's right.
We have the natural resources. We grow things. We build things. We don't have Wall Street. We don't need hedge funds because they don't do anything but manipulate money.
Yep.
It's this part of the state that helped make this state great. And at one point, Massachusetts made claim to us, and we were not part of the original colony. Let's just start with there. This part of New York, our part of New York, was not part of the original 13 colonies. We were grabbed because there was money here. There was greed here. And then they came, and George Clinton, builds the canal, the Erie Canal, and takes our goods to market. It is my belief that we made New York City the greatest city in the world because of our goods moving there.
Yep.
So we should never stop trying to change. We need to control our own things. Look at the last elections for governor. They never win here. They never win in anywhere but New York City. And every bill, and this gentleman has talked about it, the fact that they allow immigrants, illegals to vote, it's only in New York City. And then those geniuses in the legislature and our majorities come over and say, okay, it was good for New York City, the most expensive place in the country to live, and probably now one of the most dangerous. And we're going to let you guys share in that. We're gonna let you share in rent control. We're gonna let you share and you can't burn your own wood. We're gonna let you share and you can't drive down your own highways the way you want to. You can't use your fresh water in Lake Erie and Lake Ontario the way you want to. They can't afford to lose us. That's why his bill and nobody else's bill has never reached the floor.
Yeah, true. Thank you. Any other questions?
Time for one more.
Karen, you want? Let me go ahead.
There are hundreds, if not thousands, of solar projects aimed at the western New York set to destroy our farmland.
Mm-hmm.
You have introduced legislation calling for the recycling of the components, which will set some of the developers back on their heels because it's very expensive. But the materials are very valuable and they cannot be allowed to go into landfills. How is your legislation progressing and what kind of support do you have?
You know, it's interesting. There's actually support. We do have support from folks on this side of the aisle for this idea of recycling. The problem is that they are beholden to the special interests that want to see this unbridled growth of solar panels and wind turbines. Anybody ever seen the picture of Assemblyman Andy Giglio standing in front of the pile of wind turbine blades in Bath, New York? Yeah. Pretty frightening, right? These wind turbines are supposed to last 30 years. They don't tell you that the blades have to be replaced every few years, and there's no place to put them. They are they're not recyclable. They're burying them in landfills. It's going to take hundreds of years for them to decompose. Same thing with solar panels. Solar panels are made up of toxic materials. They're both wind turbines and solar panels use what are called rare earth metals, which are mined in places like China. Under horrible environmental and human conditions, child labor, things like that. I mean, this is not, and everyone wants to say the green economy or the green jobs. We're not making any solar panels and wind turbines of any substance here. We make some parts and pieces, but we're not really making these things here. They're being made in China and other places and being brought over here. And we are going to have a problem with all this stuff. Okay, we're going to have a problem with all the stuff that's left over. All the impact and the carbon footprint that they're so worried about of creating these things and transporting. Everybody ever seen a wind turbine blade move down the whole, how much diesel power it takes to move one blade? It's just the total impact is not measured. That's because this isn't really about green energy. This is about money. This is about the people that are profiting. Someone figured out a long time ago that they would guaranteed profit by sucking up all of these subsidies. So it's a guaranteed profit courtesy of the taxpayers. And that's what this is about. This is about how quick can we put them up and how quick can we turn a profit on them. I mean, when I was county executive, I had a company come to me that wanted to put solar panels on our landfill. I'm like, okay, we've got these closed cells. We could put those flexible, I've seen them in other states, they put these flexible solar panels on top of these closed cells. It's a pile of garbage. What a better place to put these things on top of a pile of garbage? That's never going to be repurposed for anything. And the guys, oh, no, that's not what we're going to do. What we want to do is we want to clear cut all the trees around the landfill and we're going to put up solar panels. Because that's what we do. That's how we do it. It turned out the guy was literally a year earlier a used car salesman. I'm not making that up. These are not engineers or environmentalists. These are not people that understand how these things work. These are people that they're salesmen. They're selling something. Because once I said, well, how about if we use those flexible solar panels that can go on top of the piles of garbage? That's not what we do. That's not how we do it. So it's an investment scam, folks. That's all it's ever been. And we're going to be the ones left holding the bag, just like we are now. From the stuff that, the stuff that we did 40, 50, 60 years ago, urban renewal. We're trying to fix all that now. We're trying to take down all the things that we put up 50, 60 years ago, and those people are long dead. And now we're left with the fallout of that. And I believe this massive push to build all these renewable energy projects is going to be the same problem. It's going to be a burden for our children and grandchildren to deal with all of this stuff. And in the end, we're going to do zero to actually impact climate change.
You're doing really good.
Okay. right.
We're out of time.
All right. Yes, we're over time. Thank you all very much for being here. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Yeah. Culture as well as food banks during the pandemic.